Facebook's fourth quarter revenue grew 30%. Profits came in higher than expected. Facebook shares up 12% this morning. That is the biggest gain for the stock post-earnings in 3 years.
Yeah.
I guess my first question is, are you surprised? Because based on the coverage I've seen, there are definitely people out there who are surprised because 2018, from a headline perspective, not a good year for Facebook.
No, it was a terrible year for Facebook, and they had been guiding more expenses because of all the scrutiny they've been under and everything else. But I think what's helping to drive the results this time is that Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO, said, "Hey guys, we're kind of done with all those. I mean, we're going to still have higher expenses than in years past. But I've got a quote here. We've made real progress in many of these areas about improving security, content governance, data privacy, that kind of stuff. That's what everyone's been worried about." And Zuckerberg said, quote, "We've made real progress. In many of these areas, we believe we built the most advanced systems in the world, and in many cases, more advanced than any other company or government."
Well, that's bold.
And yeah, it is. It is. And that, if I was worried about the Facebook's privacy stuff, then yeah, those words will go a long way toward relieving that such worry. But and so now paired with that, they're saying, okay, we're going to start paying more attention to building new ways for people to use the site, and for us to get more ways for advertisers to get into these things. For instance, they have about 7 million total advertisers across their entire system. Only about 2 million of them are advertising on Instagram Stories, and Stories is growing pretty healthily. And so one of the ways they're going to grow is to get more advertisers onto Instagram Stories.
You mentioned the expenses, and I think that is something that really needs to be highlighted here in this regard. A year ago, we were in this studio talking about how Zuckerberg had come out and said, look, we're going to be investing. We're going to be hiring people to focus on security. And we didn't know what the numbers were going to be, but we knew they were going to be higher. We knew expenses were going to be higher because he was very blatant about that, very transparent about that. And now I think we've got a fourth quarter report where we can see for ourselves, okay, these are what the expenses were, and they're still growing revenue, and they're still growing their profit.
Oh, yeah, they're still growing revenue. Not as fast as they had been.
Right.
I mean, for the full year, they grew revenue by 38%. But for fourth quarter, as you said, they only grew by 30%, which means it was growing faster earlier in the year. And actually, for every single quarter of 2018, the revenue growth slowed down year over year as you went through the year. So, and they're only guiding 26% for the first quarter this year. So yeah, the expenses are still a big deal, but we know where the expenses are going. I mean, they said they've grown their security employee base from 10,000 to 30,000 people over the past year, and that's quite a big improvement. They're spending a lot of time and effort doing that, and so I think that a lot of the enthusiasm in the market right now is, hey, it's working. And so
this wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be.
But I still have a little bit of a worry in my back of my mind. I mean, Zuckerberg sounded certainly enthused. Hey, we've got the best in the world, better than governments even. We're hot stuff, right? But in contests or battles like this, Facebook is always going to be on the defensive. They got better AI at identifying bad actor posts, for instance. But those bad actors are not going to say, oh, darn, you got me. I'll go find someplace else to do it. They're going to say, no, how do I get around what they've got? And they'll find a way, and then Facebook will react, and they'll find another way. And so the offense here is always going to have an advantage. And I'm kind of worried that Facebook might sit back on its laurels saying, hey, we've got the best in the world, and not continue to fight the good fight, so to speak. And we might, and if they do that, sit back, that is, if they do that, we could very well see them in front of Congress or the European Union again.
Also, Facebook has to deal with Apple. And I'm just going to read directly from a Wall Street Journal story. Apple banned a Facebook research app for breaking its rules around data collection in an escalating battle between the tech giants over user privacy. Apple said it revoked Facebook's permission to maintain a research app that had targeted teens and young adults, paying them $20 a month to suck up their data and track their activity across different apps and web browsers. The tech news site TechCrunch reported on the Facebook research program earlier this week.
This is just bizarre.
It is a little bizarre, and it is it's a couple things. It's bizarre. It bears watching.
Yep.
And this kind of flies a little bit in the face of what you were talking about in terms of Zuckerberg saying, "Hey, we're out there. We're being good actors." It's not that necessarily what they're doing here is illegal, but it's certainly in the face of Apple. Apple has decided, no, you're violating our terms. We're not going to allow this app in our store, and we don't like what you're doing.
And that was my very thought. I mean, Facebook is saying on the one hand, we're protecting users' data, and on the other hand, we're paying people to suck up that data. Yeah. And Apple's saying, no, that violates our terms because you're using something that's meant for research out in the public sphere. One quote I like is, what are people using with the money they're being paid for? And one college student said, oh, I was buying video games and Axe body wash. So
sounds about right.
Sounds about right. But this isn't the first time Facebook has done something like this either. And they're I guess everyone in this field is desperate to get data in order to figure out what, for example, what your opponents are doing. I mean, Facebook did a very similar thing with Onavo a while back, another kind of data sucking app to figure out what people are doing. And they saw WhatsApp before they bought WhatsApp. They had noticed that people were using WhatsApp more and more and more and more, and the growth of that was skyrocketing, certainly faster than Facebook's own version of that. And that led to Facebook's decision to pay, how much was it?
$19 billion.
$19 billion for it several years ago, and now it's a big growth thing for them. But they kind of cheated to figure that out.
It's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. And in particular, because while Mark Zuckerberg is pretty reluctant to do media, Tim Cook is not. And I would not be surprised if Cook were asked about this the next round of interviews he did.
And another point on this is that Facebook only said, okay, we're going to pull off this app, this latest one that they got caught on, after it had gotten out into the media. But Apple kind of trumped them and said, no, we're kicking you out.